Right here, right now, I put the offer out. I don't want to chase you down. I know you see it. You run with me, and I can cut you. Welcome, 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 Dominica, to the other side, other side. I'm your host, Tanya Dickson. And as usual, I have with me my fellow co-host, Hotelia, Mr. Sam Raphael, and businessman, Mr. Kenny Green. Yeah? And of course, every Tuesday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. right here on Q95, we present the views which are different from what you normally hear on a range of current event topics. So let me see. Hi, Sam, you're there with me, and Kenny.
Can you hear me?
Hey,
You hear me?
guys.
Hi, how are you?
Everybody okay?
Yeah,
Yeah?
we good, we good. We
All right.
nice.
Okay, Irie. This evening, I know a lot of people thinking that school is out. Yeah? School may be out for some of you guys, but not for the other side. Yeah. In fact, tonight we're going to have a midterm assessment of the performance of the government and the opposition. And we're going to have some guests here with us. I like to call them tonight the graders. Yeah, we can't call them the examiners. Examiners, give the exam, but these guys are gonna these guys are gonna assess tonight the performance. Yes, the assessors. It's also called the graders in the US, the graders. They're going to assess the performance of the government within this midterm that we're here at. I'm hoping we could take it back too, take it back because this government has been here for a long time, right? So I have with me as guest Mr. David Jones, five-term senator of the legislature of the Virgin Islands, right next to me, guy with a nice smile. He's blushing. And as well, Mr. Louis Patrick Hill, likes to be called Nietzsche. Yes. That's your Kalinago name? So I'll be calling him Nietzsche tonight. Yes, he is a former finance chair, vice president, and president of the U.S. Virgin Islands Senate. Now, I feel this one going to be a little bit, I'm going to keep it real, a little spicy tonight, interesting. So I want to start off by reading our quote from Bertrand Russell. It's just a reminder for us, you know? So I'm going to start reading that for you guys. I should like to say two things, one intellectual and one moral. The intellectual thing I should want to say to them is this: when you are studying any matter or considering any philosophy, ask yourself only what are the facts and what is the truth that the facts bear out. Never let yourself be diverted either by what you would wish to believe or by what you think could have been beneficent social effects if it were believed. Look only and surely at what are the facts. That is the intellectual thing that I should wish to say. The moral thing I should wish to say to them is very simple. I should say love is wise, hatred is foolish. In this world, which is getting more and more closely interconnected, we have to learn to tolerate each other. We have to learn to put up with the fact that some people say things we don't like. We can only live together in that way, and if we are to live together and not die together, we must learn the kind of charity and kind of tolerance which is absolutely vital to the continuation of human life on this planet. So, without further ado, let all views contend as we dig deep and get to the other side. Yeah? How are you guys? Mr. Jones, Nietzsche?
I'm doing great, thank God, for
Right,
a
and you have a
beautiful
sexy
day.
voice too, Papa. Sam is smiling. Look at
And
Sam.
and
You're not the sexy one today, Sam. Have a new, partner in crime. Yeah? And Mr. Nietzsche, how are you?
I'm well, thank you very much, and thank you so much for inviting me to this program. I really deeply appreciate it, and pleasant evening to all of the listening audience out there. I'm
Right.
looking forward to having a really interesting dialogue.
Me too. I want to welcome you guys again and thanks for joining us. So let's start with you, Mr. Jones. Tell us about you. I'm gonna be really honest. I had a hard time finding out about you. I had a hard time. I had a hard time. So I want the audience to know who is here with me. Tell us a little history about you working in politics. What are you doing now?
Well, first of all, I am really happy to be here this evening to join in this discussion. I think it's timely um, to the extent that we are able to make a positive contribution. I think it would be very, very helpful. I was born in Dominica. I was raised in Rosal, and my mother took me to St. Croix, kicking and screaming at 11. I didn't want to leave because I wanted to be with my granny. That's most kids want to be with their grandparents.
Mm.
And got involved in politics through the teachers union. I was a labor leader of the American Federation of Teachers. I was an officer of the AFT and responsible for the political education and organization of the organization itself.
Mm.
I went to school in New York. I studied political science. I have a degree in political science and economics. Came back to St. Croix, began teaching, and that's how I got involved in the union. I became a member of the Democratic Party, and that's how I met my colleague, Nietzsche. We worked together in the Senate. We did a lot of good things for the people of the Virgin Islands, and now I'm here to rediscover my own because I left when I was very young.
Mm.
I pretty much spent most of my time in the Virgin Islands, and coming back home is really, really a pleasure because Dominica nice.
So, what have you been doing since you're back home?
Well, I retired from the Senate and politics in the Virgin Islands, although they still want me to come back
Mhm.
to help with elections and the governance of the territory. But right now, I'm simply relaxing and I'm retired and enjoying private life.
Okay. No business, no contributions to Dominica.
Well, yes.
Hmm.
uh, in 2017, when I came back after the hurricane, I responded to the government's, the prime minister's uh, call for making Dominica the first climate resilient country in the world. And I said, well, that's very good because that is something that I would like to participate in.
Hmm.
I have a building system, Emadui building system that is earthquake and hurricane resilient, and it is 40% lighter than concrete. And as a result of our building system, it is well suited for this particular climate. And so I'm working on financing for a development in that respect. The government of Dominica has done a good job in restoring the island after the devastation of Hurricane Maria, as far as the infrastructure is concerned, and the housing sector is a good thing. I think that they have done well, particularly since they didn't have the kind of support that the Virgin Islands would have from United States. FEMA, billions of dollars are available for United States Virgin Islands in recovery funding, whereas in Dominica they've had to depend on grants and financing from other entities. But I think they did a good job in restoring the island after the hurricane. So
That's where you're at.
I'm here to really help
Hmm.
to make Dominica better.
Okay. And so you think you're eligible for this assessment?
Well, to the extent that I can make that contribution based on my observation, yes, I guess.
Okay. Mr. Nietzsche, quiet over there. Tell us more about you.
All right. So, yeah, once again, a pleasant evening to everyone who's listening. And again, thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
having me here this evening. I was born on Waitakubuli, Kahanago territory, Crayfish River, Solibia, but Iwasi, that's that area. So I grew up there as a child, went to primary school in the territory. At the age of 10, I moved to Grand Bay and lived all of my teenage years, exciting years in Grand Bay. had a really good time growing up there. I went to grammar school, studied at the grammar school, graduated in 1978. I was the head boy of the Dominica Grammar School when I graduated. And very, very soon after having graduated from high school, I got an opportunity to move to the U.S. Virgin Islands, St. Thomas. So I moved there, and very shortly after that, I joined the U.S. Army, U.S. Army Infantry Branch. Spent 7 absolutely fabulous, phenomenal years in the military, in the U.S. military. Traveled extensively. Served in the first Gulf War of 1991 in Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. Spent about a year in theater. So yeah, and while I was in the military, I was going to school. The U.S. Army is a great program. You know, if you're there, they pay for your schooling. So I went to school. I spent 7 years in the Army. It took me 7 years to get my bachelor's degree. So, you know, long time, big struggle. School at night, class there in the bush, just about a constant struggle. But I always had a deep appreciation for education and knew intrinsically that in order to sort of reach your potential, your full potential in life, education is really necessary. And so I pursued it as much as I could. After I left the Army, I went back to the U.S. Virgin Islands. I really had not spent very much time in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and I sort of it was a transition place for me. But I went back there in 1995 after I left the U.S. Army and started a life there. I didn't go to school there. I didn't have family there. I married a lady from the U.S. Virgin Islands, and so that's how I ended up living in St. Thomas. So in 1995, I went back there, and by 1998, I was deeply involved in Virgin Islands politics, Democratic Party politics.
We missed something, man.
What's that?
Well, we missed something because you just tell us 1995 you went back there.
Yes, to live with no history of living there.
Yeah, so what
before.
happened? How you got into politics in 1998? That's a key point.
Yeah, so I have always been interested in politics. So from when I was in high school, I knew I wanted to be in public service, politics, public administration. That was my field. So even in my studies, and joining the military, it was I wanted to experience leadership. I wanted to gain those leadership qualities, and so I was always preparing for public office up to that point. And as soon as I got the opportunity to get involved in politics, I did. I just joined the party. I just went, joined, signed up, started going.
You just went and signed up.
Sign up, and I started going to meetings.
Nobody called you there. You just went and signed up.
I found them. I found out where they were and signed up.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and so I got involved in Virgin Islands politics in like 1997. I was involved in Charles Turnbull's election in 1998. I played a critical part in his election for governor. And he was elected into office in 1998, November. 1999, he took office, appointed me to one of the highest positions in the Virgin Islands. And it just exploded after that.
Just exploded.
Yeah.
So I probably should ask him the same thing I asked you, Mr. Jones. You eligible then for this assessment?
I certainly hope so. I can give my humble view and opinion. I've been back home now for 11 years, and I pay close attention to the politics of the country because I am very interested in politics, and so I have a few thoughts on the subject matter.
Right. But what are you doing now? You didn't tell us. What are you into now?
So I'm into all kinds of stuff, but mostly I'm into farming.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a farmer. I have a nice farm. I'm growing sort of different stuff. I'm growing vanilla and cocoa and avocados and mangosteen. I don't know if you know what mangosteen is.
Yes, I know mangosteen.
I have. I think I have the largest number.
And you
of
didn't come with
mangosteen.
any?
They're not in crop yet.
That's not nice.
Not bearing yet. Not bearing yet. But yeah, so I'm into farming, spending a significant amount of my time farming, and doing. I'm also, full disclosure, I'm also the chairman of the board of DOASCO.
Okay.
The prime minister and the government asked me to serve as the chairman of the board, so I do that. I teach at the college. I teach a course, political science, at
Okay.
the state college. So I'm active. I'm very involved in the community and just trying to make my contribution. I retired and came home at an early age so that I could contribute to the development of my country. So I'm trying to do that best I can.
All right. It's just to bring everyone back for those who probably just joined, just to let you all know where we're at. This evening we're going to do a midterm assessment of the performance of the government as well as the opposition and our graders, our guests tonight. We have Mr. David Jones, who's a five-term, senator of the legislature of the Virgin Islands. And we have Mr. Louis Patrick Hill. We're going to call him Nietzsche.
Mhm.
Yes, he's former finance chair, vice president, and president of the U.S. Virgin Islands Senate. Sam, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't. I know we have to discuss the assessment of the government, but I'd like to touch a little on these gentlemen's background because I know them from the Virgin Islands, and I know the significant contribution that they made, both of them being at different times president of the Senate of the Virgin Islands. And you have to be actually, unlike Dominica, a senator in the Virgin Islands is an elected official. That's like a member of parliament. So they had to run and they had to win seats. And I think they both won 5 elections. I know David did. I don't know if
Yes.
Senator Hill also. So they both 5 successful elections, but they were both from Dominica, which is interesting. Because David really paved the way. I think he was the first non-native president of the legislature, and he had some serious challenges. And at that time, there was in their upbringing, especially David's, because he lived there, I think, longer than Senator Hill did. He had to go through a lot of actual discrimination and challenges. So, David, maybe you can touch a little on that, and Louis, maybe you can also touch on that, just to give the audience some idea of what I mean. Now the Virgin Islands isn't like it was back then. There are many more opportunities, and you guys basically paved the way for this generation. So take us back just a little. I don't want to take too much of the time of the program. I think, Tanya, you're on point with the interview, but I just like to touch a little, then to touch, if that's okay.
Well, it's I really don't like talking about myself per se, but yeah, I was the first naturalized citizen in the history of the Virgin Islands to be elected president, and it was not an easy task because, notwithstanding the fact that we are Caribbean people, there is a sense in the native population in the Virgin Islands that those of us who come from other parts of the region are considered to be aliens or Dong Islanders. And it was felt that the presidency of the Senate is the purview of native Virgin Islanders only. So when I became president, many in the community were really upset, and they began to create obstacles. Some of them saying, "Well, his next move is to be governor of the Virgin Islands, so we have to stop him. We cannot let this little boy from Dominica come here and tell us what to do." But we had a good time. We were able to accomplish a lot, notwithstanding some of the negative comments or obstacles that were placed before us. As a matter of fact, there was one particular piece of legislation when we were discussing the Casino Control Act, and there was one particular native Virgin Islander who was in the Senate who introduced an amendment that stated that only native Virgin Islanders could be members of the legislature or receive benefits from the government or seek elective office. and that the native Virgin Islander is someone who was born in the Virgin Islands before 1925. And so we challenged that, and I moved during the debate of that particular bill. I moved to strike that amendment from the law, and I was successful. And that kind of got under his skin. We did receive a lot of threats, but we were successful in defending all of the people, the naturalized citizens, and all the people who live in the Virgin Islands. My interest in the Virgin Islands legislature was always in economic development area of providing jobs and expanding private sector growth. We amended the economic development program and established an economic development authority. I think Senator Hill was part of that effort as well. We developed a hotel development program to enhance the construction of hotel rooms on St. Croix, because St. Croix at the time only had 1,000 hotel rooms versus St. Thomas had about 3,000. And there was always the tension between St. Thomas and St. Croix in the Senate, who would get what and how we distribute the resources. We also did a lot of stuff for the working people, particularly those in the labor unions, because I came from that area, and so we were, I guess, applauded and rewarded by being elected 5 consecutive times, and served in a number of other capacities, including finance and education and labor. And Nietzsche was more into environmental program areas. At times, we would have a tussle over preservation of the environment versus creating jobs and creating economic opportunity. But we were able to come together and work successfully and provide the balance of the tree huggers, as I call them, waiting for the second coming of Columbus, and those persons who need employment and to be gainfully employed and create a standard of living that would be great for them and their children.
You know, the David and I had very few disagreements in the Senate. David and I only served one term together. So when I came in, when I got elected for the first term was the term that he served as president, and then I served. So we served 2 years together in the Senate. And the issue that David is I think it was a big issue, economic development versus preservation, was the opportunity to build a really first-class marina in St. Thomas. And, you know, I was at the time chairing the planning committee, which was the environmental and planning committee, which was the committee that had to approve the permit for the for the marina. And David was the president. And so I got elected on a strong environmental platform. So I had groups that were lobbying really hard against digging up the sea and destroying the coral and all of that stuff. And so I had to respond to that. But we worked it out. Development is always and should always be a balance between preserving the environment and creating economic opportunity for people. There must always be a balance. It cannot be one against the other. There must be a balance. So we were able to strike a really good balance. And today there's a very beautiful marina in St. Thomas that hosts all of the mega yachts from around the world. Large shopping area. I mean, it's beautiful. So yeah, we were very instrumental in making that happen. But I had a good time in the Senate. I spent five consecutive terms, and then I retired. One of the things that I am proudest of doing.
I was about to ask you that. Let's hear that.
Yeah.
Your biggest accomplishment.
It may not, in terms of
in Senate.
Yeah, in terms of people and their assessment of it, it might not be my biggest accomplishment, but I view it as my most cherished, my
Mhm.
most cherished accomplishment is the setting aside of 18.75, I think, acres of oceanfront property that is now a public park.
Mm.
And I led the effort. I did everything possible, and to have the government. This was a private property. It could have gone to develop a hotel, but we led an effort to acquire it, for the government to acquire that property. The government paid, I think, it was $8 million US, and we acquired that property and turned it into a public park that will always be there for Virgin Islanders for all generations to enjoy. Because I felt at the time that all of the beaches were being developed. Every single beach in St. Thomas has a hotel. And once the hotels take over, what they do is they sort of take over the beach.
So locals can't
And
can't get
locals
to
have
them.
a very difficult time
Yes.
getting, there's a way to go, but they make it a maze for you to get there. So this one we protected. And so now the St. Thomas has two beautifully protected beaches, Miggins Bay and Smith Bay Park. And I was instrumental in the Smith Bay Park acquisition and development. So that is my most cherished accomplishment. But we did some other big things. We did GRS reforms, reforming the retirement system and ensuring that it's on solid ground for government employees. The other thing that I'm really, really proud of actually is I spearheaded and was the main author on the Renewable Energy Act for the U.S. Virgin Islands. When I came into office, there was no renewable energy policy. And so we got about to creating that policy. I actually, during that term, went to Barbados to visit Barbados and I spoke with the minister there for energy at the time, because Barbados had a very advanced solar hot water program. They were like maybe the second or third most advanced in the world in their solar hot water heating public policy. So I left Virgin Islands, went to Barbados, looked at their system, looked at their laws, spoke to the people involved in it. We got involved with the legislation from Hawaii. We crafted a BOBA, and then we put together a really comprehensive public policy for renewable energy in the Virgin Islands. So for solar, wind, bringing in electric vehicles. So that still today is the public policy that governs renewable energy in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So that was also something
So I have a question for the two esteemed gentlemen who are with us tonight. Thanks, guys, for being there. And you add a unique perspective on things, and it's really good to hear your voices describe your time in the USVIs. My first question is with relation to the difference between both the political and culture and the civil society in the USVIs, where you guys have been grounded in for most of your adult and professional lives, and now what you see in your passive kind of lives. And when I say passive, I don't mean that you're not active, but you're not directly involved in the political culture, though you are involved in civil society. What do you see as the differences and possibly the similarities? And the second question, because I like to ask in bunches, is how easy was it for you to assimilate yourself back into Dominican society? Because you both left when you're relatively young, and it's been a classic situation, especially with UK returnees, etc. But how easy has it been to assimilate yourselves back into Dominica?
As it pertains to your first question, it's different now as the Virgin Islands is concerned. That's what you're referring to, correct? Yeah. Many people are wishing for the days when we were in office, because a lot more was being done in terms of public policy and really moving the Virgin Islands forward. Now there is a lot of tension between the older folks who were in charge for many years and the young people who are now really not too particular about getting involved in politics. And there's a void that remains, because in many cases individuals who really don't have the best interest of the country or the territory, they are looking at the politics as a means of enriching themselves or their friends, as opposed to public service. And that is something that many of the people who are calling me and saying that, well, Senator, we really enjoyed you guys when you were here. We wish you all come back. Um, as far as being home, I'm rediscovering Dominica. Dominica, as I said earlier, is really nice. Uh, when I was younger, I never really ventured beyond the Princess Margaret Hospital at the time. And now I have an opportunity to discover La Plate and Belize and Bellevue and Portsmouth and those places, or even now some of the areas that I grew up going to, like Underpower, is no longer there, but that is something that I really remember.
Sorry, one clarification. One of the other things that I wanted to kind of get a glean of is your observation of the political culture and what is kind of the British, the fallover of the British parliamentary democracies, which Dominica is part of, and the USVIs. How do you see the political cultures and civil society being different or
Well,
similar?
well, the U.S. Virgin Islands, we have a Republican form of government where we have a separation of powers, and the political power is distributed among the between the various branches. The executive branch is responsible for implementing and executing the laws that the Senate or the legislature passes, and then the judiciary will interpret and determine, be the referee, if you will, to settle disputes between the executive and the legislative branches. Whereas in the system here in the Eastern Caribbean, or CARICOM, we have the parliamentary system, which uh, requires the individuals who are members of parliament are also ministers of government. So they would enact laws, and they will have the responsibility of executing the same laws. So it seems to be seamless in that respect. However, based on my observation, I've seen that the cabinet, so to speak, has more power and influence in my based on my observation in practice than individuals who are not part of the majority in the House of Assembly. Uh, in some respects, that's a good thing, because when you do have a dispute between the executive branch in our system and the legislative branch, for example, if the Senate passes a law and the governor vetoes the law, that means it does not become law. So we could either override his veto, which means then that it will become law despite his objections, or we let it stand and his veto remains. That means that he will determine what the policy should be. Whereas in the parliamentary system, the majority, I think we have 21 seats, I think, here, the majority party will control the agenda, and whatever the policy the parliament determines, that is exactly what's going to stand, because those individuals who are adopting the policy are the ones who are responsible for implementing it, as well as ministers of government in the cabinet. So that's a distinction that I think that we I have observed. It has its pros and cons. For example, here, if you well, not only in Dominica, but I think in the OECS countries, when most of these countries became independent, they adopted the same colonial constitutional a regime that they inherited from the British experience. No, they had an opportunity to make some changes. I don't think that any of them did change much of the constitutional regime that were inherited. And so you have in the Virgin Islands you have directors of various executive departments. Director of Public Works, or the commissioner, of course, is the minister, so to speak. Would be compared to the minister of Public Works in the Dominica regime. But the commissioner would have a director that's responsible for the day-to-day operation of the department. Whereas in your system, the system here in the OECS countries, you have permanent secretaries. And the permanent secretaries are permanent, they cannot be removed. So if they do not agree with the policy determination of the particular minister or ministry or party, then nothing happens, because they do have that kind of authority. That's something that I think is that could be modified, or should be modified in the parliamentary system as it pertains to, we're comparing that to the Virgin Islands Republican form that we have. I don't know what you think.
Great.
So yeah, I just briefly, because I think David gave a pretty good explanation of the differences between the two political systems or systems of governance. But first, let me just say about returning to Dominica. Returning to Dominica for me was seamless because I had always been here. I never left. I came home 3 times a year. I was here always for Creole Fest. So when I came back home, it felt like I had been gone. I planned my retirement to come back home. When I left Dominica at the age of 21, I thought I'd be gone for 15 years. I said, I'm going 15 years. I'm going to get an education, get a couple of bucks, and come back and get involved in Dominican politics. Unfortunately, or fortunately, my travel took me elsewhere. And so I came back a little later than I planned, but I always planned to come home. So it was really easy. In terms of the government, the only thing I will add to what David talked about is the fact that, and you sort of touched on it, is civil society. Civil society in the Virgin Islands is so much more active. There's so much more participation. So you have these groups all over the islands. You have the League of Women Voters. You have environmental groups. You have historic preservation groups. You have groups that are advocating for the retirement system. You have groups that are advocating for the police and for the firemen. So you have women's groups that just advocate for women. So civil society, I think, is a lot more organized, and they have a lot more political influence on the political process. So the League of Women Voters, for instance, hosts a debate. They host the entire debate during the electoral process. So there's a debate between all of the candidates running for governor. There are debates between the senatorial candidates that are carried live on television, live on radio. And the League of Women Voters host that every year. That's their thing. They are also really very, very active in terms of advocating for environmental processes. So if there is a law actually being proposed, a change in public policy, like David and I had the experience with this marina, you would have a lot of public participation. There are public hearings where people come and they talk. And just citizens, anybody can come to the Senate where you have hearings and say, well, I like this project because A, B, and C is going to create jobs. It'll do that. The environmentalists will come and say, no, we don't like it because it's going to destroy the coral. And everybody participates. And so I find that missing in Dominica.
Yeah.
I find that missing. I think this would add tremendous value to the development of the country and the
Let
whole
me ask
political.
you a question, Mr. Nietzsche.
Yes.
So who organizes the public hearings?
The public hearings are organized by the Senate.
Okay.
So the Senate, as David was saying, is a separate branch of government.
Mm-hmm.
It is not run by the executive branch. The governor has his people. The Senate is the separate branch of government. So the Senate
The
president,
first branch of
the first,
government.
it's really the first branch of
So if
government
we
in
were to
American
have more
politics.
public hearings here, who would organize those?
Well, first you would need the civil society to be organized, right? So what you need is you need groups of people coming together who have common interests. So all of the environmentalists, for instance, in Dominica, who have a common interest in protecting a particular thing in the environment, they should have an organized group that advocates.
What do you mean organized? Maybe you should explain that because I know there are
Um,
groups like that. What do you mean organized?
Monthly meetings,
Mm.
public radio stuff, articles in the newspaper, meetings publicly held.
What do you mean meetings publicly held?
Like meetings in the communities, like going out to a community that's being impacted by something and organizing the community and having a meeting to talk about it.
Mm.
For instance, infrastructure development. You're going to be, well, a perfect example would be the restoration of Roseau. I've heard a lot of talk about restoring Roseau. If you are going to restore a place in the Virgin Islands, and I was involved in that actually, there would be a historical preservation society
Mm.
that would be very involved and contribute to the process of making a decision and the process of what the outcome would be. So it would be the vision of the community that really is eventually implemented and done for public policy. So that is something that I find missing in the Dominican context.
I have to stick a pin here, guys, because I think we had a topic planned and we're going all over the place. It's
Let's go
already
back.
6:44. And, you know, we like to give the callers a chance to call in and speak with you guys and get questions answered. So let's dive in. And is that okay with you guys, Sam, Kenny? We can dive in
Of
now?
course. Yeah.
Right.
Well
Let's
done.
dive into this assessment. My first question would be, you know, how do we assess the performance? What are the measures
Of the
of the
government.
government and the
Well,
opposition?
one of the things that
What are we going to use to measure?
the only barometer that you have in measuring the success or failure of any governing body is based on their platform or their agenda.
You
or
said it's
in
the
version
only?
Yeah, because again, uh, when they campaign for election, they are coming to the public, the voters, for an interview, really, asking them to vote for me or vote for us. If we are elected, this is what we are going to do based on our assumption to ascension to power, because the voters are the ones giving up the power to the individual candidates for office to manage the affairs on the voters' behalf.
Mm.
Now, we are, in the Virgin Islands, we call it a platform. Here you call it a manifesto,
Mhm.
and every party has a manifesto, and they're giving you a detailed plan as to what it is that they're going to do when they are elected to office. Now, as Nietzsche was talking about the civil society and their involvement, this is where, after the election, the people will make sure that what it is that the government said that they were going to do, they actually begin to implement.
Mhm.
And you have in the Virgin Islands, we have public hearings. Although the platform is approved, really, because the people decided, okay, well, we like
Mhm.
what you're telling us, and we like what you want to do, so we're going to give you the opportunity to implement. The voters here, I don't think have that. I wouldn't say interest, but energy to make sure that what the government say they're going to do in their manifesto, they're actually doing it. And if they're not doing it, to make sure that they
How
do.
do you show interest? What would you consider showing interest in when the government's manifesto and ensuring that they're going to do what they set out to do?
Well, it depends on you have what, a 5-year term here. In the Virgin Islands, the executive has 4 years and the legislature has 2 years. So it's time driven. And right now is about a good time for the people
So
here
how
in
do we show
Dominica.
it?
Well, you have you call up the respective ministries to find out the status of the program as far as their manifesto is concerned.
So we just call the ministries.
Well, to find out, you need to find out what they're doing,
Mm.
right? And if
But
they're not doing anything, you organize
You
and
organize.
you organize yourself and say, okay, well, we expected you to perform X, Y, and Z at this particular time. What's the delay?
if I can interject, I think that's exactly what we're trying to do now. So it would be good, because time is of the essence, if you gentlemen did just that as sort of experts, and you just did the assessment from your perspective. So just go ahead and do the assessments, however you choose.
I was like,
yeah,
whoa.
I think David is correct. The manifesto is a level of measurement
Mhm.
against what you promised and what you have delivered, right? So that is a very precise way of measuring. But I think there are other ways too, right? So there are things that will not be covered in a manifesto. For instance, I don't think when the last election was run, COVID was on the horizon, right? So that
Right.
would not be covered in the manifesto.
Mhm.
But yet it is something that the government must address and deal with. And how do you deal with that effectively? How do people
And we get to assess the management of that.
right? So how did the country handle that? So I would say, if we look at just let's take COVID and the government's handling of this particular health crisis, I think by any measurement, the government did an outstanding job on that on managing
And
COVID.
managing COVID.
Yeah.
Definitely, I agree.
The prime minister got very early access to vaccines.
Vaccines, yes.
When there were major countries around the world that had no vaccines, Dominica had vaccines. I was honestly surprised by that. The fact that they took it really seriously, and they instituted certain protocols for controlling the movement of people, for controlling people's in and out in the community, shutting down bars, doing
And access to the country. So.
access to the country. So and clearly they had to do that, weighing the economic impact, because then shutting down the country has an economic impact. So it's for how long do you do it? How severe? So I think overall, in the management of COVID in Dominica, the government did a really excellent job.
So how do you think they manage the economic impact of COVID? You just mentioned that.
Right. So
I mean,
Well,
they
they
put
had-
things in place to keep us safe
Well,
from
they
the
had
virus.
limited resources, though. I mean, it's.
I'm just asking.
No,
there
but-
was limited
But
resources.
let me
Okay.
let me address that. One of the things that a government has to do is to keep the country running, right?
Mhm.
The country has to run. The fire station got to keep running. The police got to keep running. The teachers got to keep getting paid and teaching children.
Healthcare.
Healthcare has to function, and regardless of the economic impact, and there was significant economic impact, the country continued to run. The systems continued to function. The society functioned. It didn't function at its best because clearly there were limitations, but it functioned. It worked. The processes worked. Healthcare was delivered. There was law enforcement. Fire responded. So when you look at that, it takes significant financial resources to keep a country running. So even if the country was being impacted economically because there's no exports, there's no traffic coming in, there's no tourism generating money, there's not any major agricultural output going out, there was still somehow, however they did it, I don't know, Um, they manage the finances of the country to allow the country to continue to function and provide the services that a government has to provide. It would have been a failure on the part of the government had they not been able to do that. So if, for instance, they didn't meet a payroll because they couldn't pay civil servants, they couldn't pay the police, couldn't pay the teachers, that would have been a significant failure on the part of the government. But the fact that the country continued to run despite the economic challenges that it faced, I think is a significant accomplishment.
Okay. And we can continue. So we
Yeah,
touched on
just
COVID. What
COVID. So that
other?
was one thing.
Yeah. What about economic development? Because that's your area. So let's touch on economic
Yes,
development.
David.
Let's get to the meat of the thing.
Yes, handle economic
We're running
development,
out of
David.
time, Mr. Jones.
One of the things that I think is going to be of serious concern is the demise. Well, what is going to happen with the CBI program? Now, based on my observation, the majority of the revenues coming from into the coffers of the government significantly is from the CBI program. The population base or the tax base for Dominica, I think it's very small, and it really cannot support the overall cost of operating the country, running the country, and providing the services that are necessary. So I think we need to look at further diversification of the economy. I know that there was transformation from agriculture many years ago to financial services and tourism. Now, as far as tourism is concerned, there has to be a significant investment in the tourism plant, the product itself. We have some underperforming assets in the country that we need to leverage and maximize those assets to generate the type of the kinds of the amount of revenues that we need beyond just CBI, because CBI is I guess it depends on other factors that we do not have control over. So is tourism. We should be looking at maximizing our agricultural asset, the land and the water that we do have. I think what Nichi is doing in terms of cocoa, planting cocoa, that's something that a crop that I think we should be paying more attention to and encouraging farmers to go into that area of agriculture. We also thought of, we had that discussion the other day about CMOS. That is something that we could look at doing, because the
What
other,
about marijuana?
definitely that is something that we can do.
Absolutely.
I do not know to what extent that the government policy where growing of medical marijuana or marijuana for export for hemp and other things. Because I do have individuals or entities who are ready and to come. As a matter of fact, I've had discussions with some. We're looking at doing a hemp farm in the Virgin Islands, and this is something that I would like us to do here in Dominica to create export rather
But
than.
on the specific
importing.
question of marijuana, I find that the government is way behind on integrating marijuana production for medical purposes and whatever purposes into the economy. The U.S. Congress just passed a law to legalize and to decriminalize marijuana in the United States. We have allowed the United States to dictate our policies on marijuana for too long. Time for the government to be more
Can I?
in moving
1 second, Kenny.
moving to make marijuana an integral part of the Dominican economy.
Okay.
I'd like to step in here because it's often not understood the difference between your side of the pond, in that case, the US side, and the Caribbean, and Dominica lumps into the Caribbean, because marijuana and cannabis enters the whole de-risking argument simply because we still have very limited correspondent banking relationships, and federal law still has not allowed the Caribbean to specifically export cannabis to the United States mainland. It's a misconception, and I think one of the biggest issues is that there's not enough, and you mentioned that earlier, Mr. Hill, there's not enough discussion of the core issues that the government faces in trying to make cannabis a platform, not just for export, but an economic platform that is seamlessly integrated with our financial systems.
Right.
It's not an over-the-counter activity that can happen right now. National Bank of Dominica will not take the proceeds of any business that is selling cannabis, not because they don't want money or they don't want cannabis money or because government wants to press the cannabis producer, but because Bank of America will de-risk them and remove their correspondent status if they so find out.
Yeah.
And so it's that discussion just doesn't happen.
Yeah, you're right about that. You're right about that. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that, Kenny. But I think we have to because there are countries in the Caribbean, right, Kenny, that are definitely more advanced.
I think you just have to be a little more
integrating that into the economies.
St. Vincent is considered the most advanced, and St. Vincent has shipped one container, which it took almost 3 years to organize. You're right in that.
How long it's going to take, so we have to be more proactive.
The other countries, what the other countries have managed to do is to, just like with crypto, they've managed to make legislative progress in terms of putting structure together. You're 100% right. And primarily because in some cases they've got bipartisanship. We don't have much bipartisanship here, and that is something we've run out of time to possibly discuss because we have very few topics in Dominica where we have bipartisan support or bipartisan discussions and then legislation on.
Right.
But
unfortunately,
with regards to cannabis, it fits into a particular area of a lack of a proactive, how do you put it, decision, not just by Dominica, but by the Caribbean to make that step. We made that step because the nations up the global north decided that they were going to legalize cannabis, and then we decided to follow through. It wasn't an independent, decision that was based around an analysis of the gains that we can make.
Yeah. I don't want to cut you all too short because it's 7, but go ahead and you can wrap up that point.
But I move away from cannabis. I just want to go to economic development, which is the question that you posed, right? So when I look at Dominica and I look at economic development in the country, I would definitely say that the government is not doing as well as it should in terms of economic development. And I'll use one assessment, and that is the attraction of investment capital into the country. If you look at Dominica and you ask, where is the foreign investment? Okay, I think there's one business I'm sure that's been invested for, and that's the call center, right? So I don't know of any other major employment places that have foreign interest and capital. So I don't know what the government's strategy is for attracting foreign investment, but whatever that strategy is, I don't think it has worked very well. I think they need to revisit it. I think they need to be more aggressive with it, because that is a critical part of economic development. I don't see how countries like ours that don't have gold and oil and all of these sort of minerals develop without foreign capital.
Well, we have land and water.
Yeah, but we have to have foreign capital because we don't have. And so I would say in that particular area, the government definitely has to do a lot better.
Let me clarify that, and we'll try not to take too much time. But we have attracted some direct foreign investment in some tourism developments. Dominica is a place for small tourism plans. And we've been able to attract, Petit Colibri near where Jungle Bay is, it opened. It's a multi-million-dollar investment, and you can go from the south to the north.
Yeah, but Petit Colibri has been in development for the last 20 years or 25 years.
Correct, but you have attracted the foreign investment there. And also, further clarification, private sector investment in CBI plants is direct foreign investment because the investor actually is putting in their money, there's an additional kicker, which is the citizenship. But the investor is investing in shares or in, like in Jungle Bay's case, in actually buying villas.
Yeah. But Sammy, if you didn't have the CBI, would you have that investment?
I would say it maybe, maybe not in some cases. I think
Yeah.
Jungle Bay could stand on its own.
Yeah.
The CBI is an additional incentive, and I think we need to be clear with that. It is direct foreign investment. If, in the classical term, people are investing from foreign in a plant. Now, there is an additional incentive where citizenship comes into play. So it's not a debate whether
No.
they are or they aren't.
Yeah.
I take your point. We should have more. But just to clarify that is in
Foreign
the form of foreign.
I think a key part of foreign direct investment has to be access. And Dominica has lacked access for a long time. And if you look at an intermediate step like what's happened recently with the American Airlines flight from Miami, which have shown a lot of activity,
Yes.
that's going to increase the attractiveness of Dominica. I mean, if you look at places like Ross University, that was one of the main challenges for Ross University was access.
Yeah.
And for many businesses and tourism included, having access to Dominica is a key factor for investment. And many of the other islands had access long before we did. St. Kitts, Antigua, Grenada. It happened 30, 40 years ago, all of these different jurisdictions. So I think that is a major limitation for for any foreign direct investment that is intending to come into Dominica.
Okay. So
So what's the midterm grade, gentlemen?
Sam,
What's the midterm grade? Your grader. What's the midterm grade for the government? We don't have much time, and
we're
the
looking at the midterm.
What's
Let's
the
get a
midterm
grade for economic
A,
development.
A, B, C, D, or F?
Sam,
What midterm?
can I say something?
Mhm.
This show needs to have a two parts. Let's keep it real. We haven't touched on anything. We've just touched on what they thought about economic development and how the government has handled COVID. We haven't touched on the opposition. We haven't touched on anything. So this needs a two parts.
Let's do it.
So let's not rush this. We can only grade economic development. And I don't even think, Mr. Jones, I don't even think you get to finish. I have a feeling you have more in that head, I watching you. You have more to say. Sam is trying to rush us. You can grade economic
No, but I'm
development, and then we will take
taking
a
up
break.
time to show. I have no difficulty, Tanya,
Good.
writing
Great.
them next week.
Great. So then we're going to let them grade. Give us some out of 10. A simple grading. And then we can take a break.
So they will hold the grade until after they finish the whole discussion. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, but
That's a good idea.
we have to take a break now, and then we have to open the line. So guys, you all know what we spoke about, COVID and economic development. I know they're excited on the lines there. I see it blowing up. But let me let you guys know that we are also live on the Facebook page. I didn't take breaks today to tell you all that. I'm sorry. Kenny and Sam, they just, when they start to talk, they don't stop. But we're going to take a quick break right here. We'll be right back. Keep it locked.
Or you finally take the key. Oh, damn, suddenly you're free to fly. It'll take you to the other side. Okay, my friend, you wanna cut me in. Well, I hate to tell you, but it just won't happen. So thanks, but no, I think I'm good to go. Cause I quite enjoy the life you say I'm trapped in. Now I admire you, and that will show you do. You're onto something, really it's something. I live among the swells, and we don't pick up peanut shells. I'll have to leave that up to you. Don't you know that I'm okay with this uptown part I get to play? Cause I've got what I need and I don't want to take the ride. And I need to see the other side, so go and do like you do. I'm good to do like me. Ain't in a cage, so I don't need to take the key. Oh, damn, can't you see I'm doing fine? I don't need to see the other side. This is really how you like to spend your days. Whiskey, misery, and parties and play. If I were mixed up with you, I'd be the talk of the town. Disgraced and disowned, another one.
Welcome back, Dominica. We're here on the big station Q95. This is The Other Side. I'm your host, Tanya Dickson. And of course, I have I call them, I don't know, they're probably more outside men now, because when people see me with them, that's my outside men, Mr. Sam Raphael, Mr. Kenny Green. I really enjoy working with these guys. I learn a lot. So today we're having a midterm assessment, yes, of the performance of the government and the opposition. And we have our graders, our guests, Mr. David Jones, five-term senator of the legislature of the Virgin Islands, and Mr. Louis Patrick Hill, we call him Nietzsche, former finance chair, vice president and president of the U.S. Virgin Islands Senate. So we're talking about, like I said, we're assessing the performance. It's midterm, guys. We in middle of the 5 years, and we're looking at it. But we haven't really, we only kind of scratched the surface.
Yes.
So I think I was being pushy when I told Sam this has to be a part two, clearly. But we're going to open up the lines now. So far we've discussed economic development and COVID. So the numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097. And for those overseas, give us a call at 305-432-9624. And if you feel like and you're on the Facebook page, you can drop your comment there. I will try my best to read the ones that are civil. You heard that? Civil. Okay? So let's open up the lines. I saw some calls coming in. Let's take that one. You're live on the other side.
Yes, good evening, Miss Tanya.
Hi, good evening.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good evening to your entire panel.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Specifically, the man that's talking about the Virgin Islands a lot. I assume he's talking about the U.S. Virgin Islands, right?
That's correct.
Correct. I am your neighbor. I in the BVI. With the Virgin Islands.
Okay.
Tanya, before I do my quick contribution, let me tell you, my eyes on you for transparency, right? So keep it up. Keep it up.
Lord.
So let me say this before I make the quick contribution. How many stimulus packages you receive in the USVI? You receive any?
Well, were you there? No, they were not there. But
Well,
I'm sure
the,
you have
the
some
people,
info.
but
I
the
thought
people
you
of
lived
the
there.
people of the Virgin
No,
Islands.
they live here now, sir. They are retired.
Oh, okay.
They live
Okay,
here
but
now.
but do you know? Okay, let me rephrase that. Do you know how many stimulus packages they receive in the U.S. Virgin Islands?
Yes, the United
Okay.
States
Okay.
Congress,
That's
President
okay. Once you know,
Biden,
that's okay. We're not going
Okay.
to stay long on that.
Any more questions, caller?
Because of time, right? But I asked this question to say, right? You were talking about the government of Dominica handled the economy well in COVID. Let me say this to you, sir, without a shadow of a doubt. COVID did not do our economy nothing. Let me explain, if I can. Before COVID, money, every other sectors was ignored. Money's coming in from the sales of passport. The man don't like the sales of passport. Let me use a better word. He like the citizen by investment. And during COVID, our government told us the CBI were doing better. And some of our tax bus drivers, sir, they had to fight. Police had to beat up a man to get a stimulus package. I listen to you, but in my view, they did not handle that thing properly at all. They failed. Good night.
Thank you, caller. Let's see the other callers coming in. Caller, you're live on the other side. Hello.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. How are you, Tanya?
We're okay, thank you.
Good. Good evening to the rest of your panel.
Good evening.
Mr. Jones, I trust that everything is everything with you, but I have a question for Mr. Patrick Hill. Mr. Patrick Hill.
Yes, sir.
I'm well happy that you were able to lay out what happened in Dominica in contrast to what happened in the Virgin Islands. And we know this is just chalk and cheese. If you really can't compare and contrast the level of governance that is in Dominica with the Virgin Islands. But I'm very much disappointed in you, Mr. Patrick Hill. And let me tell you why.
Tell me why.
Are you aware that the government of St. Kitts and Nevis gave its citizens free stimulus, plus money is coming. There's going to be an increase for them. In sharp contrast to Roosevelt Skerrit, who has Dominica $4.something billion hiding somewhere. As to where he is, only he, Roosevelt Skerrit, and Anthony Hayden that know where that money is. For you to tell me that Roosevelt Skerrit has handled Dominica economic good in spite of COVID, Mr. Patrick Gill, I personally believe that you're trying to get favor from Mr. Skerrit, so you will not speak about the hardship that is going on in Dominica.
Okay,
You have all your
caller.
millions that you came from
Okay,
the Virgin Islands.
caller. Running out of
Enjoy it.
time.
Take care.
All right, thank
Well,
you.
thank
You
you.
want to
Gentlemen,
respond to that?
No, I just want to tell the gentleman I appreciate his sentiment.
Great.
I totally
Okay.
appreciate your call, man.
Okay. I think we have something else coming in, do we? No? What do you all think about that in the
No,
meantime?
I think there is a misperception
Mhm.
of what COVID actually was. To many, they looked at the issue of stimulus coming from government to stimulate or keep the economy going.
Mhm.
Um, the economy of Dominica is entirely different from the economy of the U.S. Virgin Islands, and because U.S. Virgin Islands is a part of the United States, is a territory of the United States, any benefit that U.S. citizens receive, uh, the citizens of the United States Virgin Islands will also benefit from that as well. As far as Dominica is concerned, what Senator Hill was referring to, and I agree with him, is that the management of the economy of Dominica, there was no collapse. The public services continued. You still had sanitation, the garbage collected, police. You had
You know how you guys,
security.
Mr. Jones, was talking about how to measure success?
Mhm.
And you mentioned manifesto. So you're saying here now that they managed public service well. But you have to
Within a
remember,
pandemic. It's a global
great,
pandemic, right?
great.
It,
I
it, it
agree,
was, yeah.
things kept going, the hospital's still working. Yeah, that's still running, that's still running. But remember, I believe when assessing as well success and performance, you're going to hear from people, the voice of the people.
No, absolutely.
Yes.
Right?
No.
And I think the voice of a lot of people who not in the government building right now working, have a career, they say, well, I lost my job.
Right.
And Domlek was still calling and Dubasco was still there. I
Where
still
the
had to
lights were
feed those
on,
kids.
the
So
water was running. I mean,
yes.
the country was running. I mean, that's important.
Yes,
No,
and that is important,
Yeah.
but I'm thinking that's where they're also coming from, needing that assistance
Listen,
at that
Yeah,
time.
on an individual basis, yes,
Yes.
they receive that kind of
but that's totally,
benefit.
And even,
listen, that's
some
totally,
small businesses to restaurants.
Right,
absolutely.
And
right,
No,
right.
if you're,
listen,
yeah.
COVID was not an easy thing. It was a difficult
Mhm.
process, and
Mhm.
so there was some pain in the country. There's no doubt about that,
Right.
right? So
I think it's when you
certain
said
people
there
lose
was barely any economic impact. I think that's what,
um,
for some people, it's like,
yeah, maybe.
yeah.
The one point that I just want to point out to the callers in terms of stimulus and that and the U.S. thing, it's really unfortunate. We cannot compare
Yes.
America to Dominica.
The economy is
In-
different,
difficult-
right?
And the U.S. they just print their own money. They just print. Yeah, I mean they're in billions and trillions of dollars
In debt.
in debt right now.
We have a-
But they just print.
We have
You
a call
cannot
coming
print
in.
money down here.
Let's take this one. Caller, you're live on the other side.
Hi, good evening,
Good
Tanya.
evening.
Good evening to the gentleman you have in your panel.
Good evening,
Good
sir.
evening, sir.
I heard a gentleman speaking a while ago, and I take offense. Sorry
Well,
about that.
no
but,
offense was meant. No offense was
hi.
meant.
Can you hear me?
Yes, just speak up a little
Now,
bit. Mhm.
I don't know the gentleman name, but he said about the economy has been well managed, that it did not collapse. For me, I don't accept that, because when you have, let's say, for instance, the banana industry bringing in millions of dollars in the past, up to like $30 million or more annually, and now it's only bringing in 400 and something $1,000. That is collapse. When you had, before this administration come in, there were how many businesses established here, factories and companies and this thing. Today, you have none of that. That is collapse. When you had a better medical health sector, and today, for any little thing, hospital can even provide simple things to save lives. That is collapse. So if you look all around, what's the educational sector? That is also a collapse. And you all speak about the marijuana. Now, where were you all when this government was decriminalizing marijuana so that you can have more young men on the block smoking more weed than they were smoking before, rather than using the cannabis to make meth up to actually make for medical purposes rather. For me, this is bad governance, bad leadership, and there's so much more I can say about that, but I'm just giving you a heads up before you say more and talk about this government is doing this and doing that. The government has failed, and don't say they didn't do very well. They have done bad to this country because this country was advanced. Now every other little country that was way behind this country has passed it economically and otherwise. So that is collapse also. When you come to the point where you have to end up selling passports for your economy to survive, brother, when you had all these companies and all these things running this country before this government come in, that is collapse. So think about what collapse is in an economy, bro, and come back again. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
I think the caller needs a bit of a correction here.
Yeah, there's a
I
couple
think
of
yes.
several
Firstly,
corrections.
Mr. Nishi was actually referring to during the COVID period, the collapse. But I guess a lot of customers
His
sorry,
data is
callers' mind.
There's a couple mythologies about Dominica that keeps on being said, and it helps sometimes to put a different perspective on things. The banana industry was subsidized. It was totally subsidized by the British. As soon as the subsidy was removed, with the assistance of the United States government and the lobbying
Yes,
of
the WTO,
the banana industry collapsed, and it collapsed
absolutely.
completely. We lost something like 2,000 farmers in the first year.
Yeah.
It's one of those mythologies that keeps on persisting, that somehow there's a nirvana of bananas that is not being upheld. It's gone. It's not coming back.
Kenny, just I wanted to say something about bananas, for real. I mean, I'm farming right now, but I would never grow bananas. I don't understand why we still are stuck in the banana farming thing. We have to move. We have to move away from that. We cannot compete in the banana market right now. We cannot compete.
But
so we have to find.
I see a comment. I see a comment.
I think it was St. Lucia who was actually, you all saw that article on St. Lucia now providing to nearby countries like Antigua bananas. So I guess people are thinking, well, if they can do it, why can't we?
But that's small.
I see a comment.
Yeah, I know, but still, they think it's still something. They're talking about we collapse,
I see a comment in the group that I want to address. Someone says in your St. Kitts has CBI like Dominica, yet they were able to give stimulus paid debt owed to IMF in 2016. And again, perspective. St. Kitts had the highest debt to GDP ratio in the world at one point. They did use their CBI to draw down that debt to GDP to the point where the economy stabilized. At the same time, St. Kitts did not have an Erica and a Maria. Dominica used its CBI resources largely to recover. So it's a case of a different perspective. People put these things up and they measure it directly as if everyone starts from the same point.
Can we take another call?
Yeah,
Sorry.
take it.
Yeah, because let me take that one. Caller, you're live on the other side. Hello? You need to low down your radio if you want to hear me. Hello, caller. Okay, I'm going to take another call. Okay, lost that one. Caller, you're live on the other side.
Hi, Tanya. How you doing?
I'm okay. How are
you? And your guest.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
I've been listening to you. I'm not going to touch the performance of governance and all of that. But I'm going to touch another part of the discussion. When the marijuana issue came up, and Mr. Green mentioned the fact that St. Vincent and other Caribbean islands having would be a problem to get the product into America. Today, not even a grapefruit you could just bring in America. Okay, that is one aspect of it. Everything that goes through the United States that's agricultural has to go through some serious paperwork and testing and make sure there are no invasive species or any kind of foreign weed or bugs and all these things. So that's one part of it. Another part of it, we in the region have had heavy illegal drug smuggling and corruption. So that is another part of it as far as when it comes to the banking. So it's going to make it harder to bring any product in the country. So these things we must take into consideration. You just don't say generally, or it's hard to get into America and whatnot, and some people look at America a certain way. You must say your pros and cons, say two sides to the story, so people have a better understanding. And before I go, I would like to say one more thing. So in the same vein, if you are in the Caribbean right now, for instance, I will give you an example. Puerto Rico was affected heavily by the rest of the English-speaking Caribbean, okay, from a British eye. Puerto Rico could have gotten help from the region immediately, right there in the region. The neighboring islands who wanted to give a little what they have and help. There is a law that bars any kind of shipment from outside of the United States just rolling into Puerto Rico from the region. It's called a Harry something law. I don't remember exactly the full name, but there is a law. It's been in place for the like 75 years or more. Anything that if the Caribbean were to give the sister islands to give to Puerto Rico in terms of food, water, whatever, to help during that Maria storm, it would have to go up to Florida, process in Florida, and come back down to the Caribbean. So there are a lot of different things in place just to do that. One of the gentlemen who work in the Senate or the president or
Need to wrap
what
it
he
up,
said he
caller.
was, you know, so he might can tell you the law that prohibits that, but that's the part I want to talk about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I had a few calls coming in and I don't, let me take one again. You're live on the other side. Hello? This is probably the same call. Let's take the next one. Good evening. You're live.
Boy, I have to say I am Malandi. I'm privileged to get on again. Quick.
Quick
Miss
is
Tanya.
right. Mm-hmm.
Yes, Mr. Tanya, how could you say that the hospitals and schools were still functioning when I just told you that before COVID, we were doing well? The man also said the economy did not collapse. I told him during COVID, we were doing extremely well. It could not collapse and everything had to function because we had money like bees. That's why 4.2 billion missing.
You're something else, you know. Okay, thank you, caller.
Can I jump in?
I'm jumping, yes.
One quickly. I think we need to be cautious and respect different points of views. But when someone makes an emphatic, point that the education system collapsed, I just don't get that. Right now, I think we have more college graduates. Right now, we have more school attendants. Right now, you have much more. And gentlemen, correct me,
But you
Dave,
have the
because
facts for that? You have facts for more school attendance?
So we will say that we have more persons going to universities and colleges now than ever
You mean
before.
registered to go?
No, going there, we have more
And
students.
attending.
And attending?
Yes.
I've been hearing a lot of things.
Yes. So
Yes.
when people
I
make
think-
those suggestions about
We're
education
just talking
system,
about university here, and you're talking about college.
Well, higher education.
Oh, higher education, okay.
we have far more opportunities in higher education than we've ever had before. I don't think that can be disputed. Gentlemen, clarify that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
absolutely correct. I
You're
mean,
correct. I
you
think
know,
if
one of the things that
go ahead.
we have in is what we call operational definitions, right? So the particular caller defined collapse in his operational manner to operate whatever it is he wanted to, the point he wanted to make. So he utilized examples that would support his thesis or his theory. But you also have to look at the fundamentals of governing. When an economy collapses, that means that nothing happens. You have rampant crime, you have sanitation issues, public transportation dies, education is non-existent, healthcare is non-existent. So that is what a collapse means to me. That's my operational definition of the term. During the pandemic, and it was global in nature, it affected everybody. And to the extent that you had the resources available to manage its impact, would determine how successful you were in terms of keeping everything stable, to have stability in the country. So I think the government of Dominica, comparatively speaking to other parts of the region, as I observed, did an excellent job in managing the impact of COVID, in my estimation.
Any last words, guys? Because I'm running out of time and I can't take any more calls for now. So, Mr.
I want to know
Nietzsche,
if we're doing this again.
we have to. We have to because this is so incomplete.
Let's do it again. I totally agree, Sam. I think we should save the grading for the next, because we need to cover.
No, give us the grade for economic development. No, you cannot leave without.
Tanya, let them save it for next week, man. Let the audience.
Let's do it again.
Okay, so we on for next week then. Okay, good.
You guys, both of you available next week?
Absolutely. Let's do it again.
I'm always
this is an interesting discussion.
Remember, he's rediscovering Dominica.
Yeah.
You can just come to tongue, man.
It was definitely a very interesting
discussion.
Yes, it is.
And it needs the time to
and callers, I am very sorry you all didn't get enough time today to call in and express your views, but we have to wrap it up. Has been really good. Thank you for coming, Mr. David Jones, Mr. Louis Patrick Hill, Nietzsche. I love that name, yes, Nietzsche. And again, thanks, Sam. Thanks, Kenny. It has been very interesting. We're going to be back with a part 2 on this, guys. Yes. The midterm assessment of the government and the opposition. I hope you guys heard that.
Exactly.
We need to get of the opposition as well. Yes. So next week, sorry, Sam?
No, I wasn't saying anything.
Okay. Next week, same time, same place. Okay. Big station, Q95. Yeah?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Right now, I put the offer out. I don't want to chase you down. I know you see it. You run with me, and I can cut you free out of the treachery of walls you keep in. So trade that
the Global View on Q, the big station. Insights into where the people of Dominica